Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the Fnatic Focus 3, providing a nice alternative to the hybrid Fnatic Dash, which released in May of 2020. Just to give you guys an overview of how the pad looks on my desk, it is 950 by 450, and the foam is advertised as 4mm thick. I would say that the plush on this definitely gives way a little bit easier than most pads. Feels very, very good. And as far as the stitched edging and the logo, which is not raised, both feel very good, look very good, and are definitely high quality. The pad that is most comparable to the Fnatic Focus 3 is the Glorious 3 XL. I would say that it is kind of a generic feeling mouse pad as far as a typical gaming pad, but it is an enjoyable pad, and I did perform very well on the Focus 3. I would say I definitely prefer it over the Glorious 3 XL. It definitely seems like it's going to have more durability, and it seems more tightly knit. So because it feels more tightly knit, you don't feel much of the surface underneath your skates. I do have glass skates on my G Pro Superlight from Lethal Gaming Gear, and the gameplay clips later in the video will be on the G Pro Superlight with those glass skates, and it feels phenomenal on the Focus 3. I literally feel like I'm gliding my mouse on pretty much just air. It feels that good matched with the the glass skates. As far as dynamic friction compared to the Glorious 3 XL, you can see that the glass skates come to a fairly nice stop on the Glorious 3 XL, and likewise with the Fnatic Focus 3, they come to a nice abrupt stop and feel very, very good. I would say that dynamic friction is actually a little bit higher on the Focus 3, despite the pad feeling a lot smoother, and the static friction is very similar to the Glorious 3 XL, but might be just a hair more controlled than the Glorious 3 XL. So even with the glass skates out of the way and moving to Tiger Ice skates, you can see that the control on the Glorious 3 XL, as far as a little bit of force, the mouse definitely moves on the Orochi V2, comes to a nice little abrupt stop, and likewise with the Fnatic Focus 3, it is very similar, but you can see the mouse doesn't really glide as much as the Glorious 3 XL. And again, even with those PTFE Tiger Ice skates, the pad just feels a whole lot better under the mouse than the Glorious 3 XL. You really don't feel or hear much of the pad, and it's definitely a more silky feeling gliding the mouse than the Glorious 3 XL. It felt absolutely fantastic in Splitgate, which is a fairly flick-heavy game, and I feel like most tag shooters, Splitgate also requires you to have a fair amount of crosshair control when moving from a flick into another action, and I felt like the pad lended itself very well to those movements, going from a flick and going into steady crosshair-controlled static-type movements. And moving into Apex Legends, I felt like tracking was actually very fun on this pad. The pad is, again, very smooth, so it feels a lot faster than it really is. So you feel very comfortable flicking from target to target. You feel very comfortable in pulling your spray towards whatever target you are trying to spray. I feel like my flicks felt good, my spray felt good. Overall, it's just a generally good pad with a nice level of balance. And one of the great things about the pad as well is that for additional control for spray, the foam of the pad, you are able to push it in quite a bit to be able to get a little bit extra control on whatever mouse it is that you might be using. It is a little bit harder than pushing in like a Artisan Soft, but it is a lot easier than most harder density foamed pads. Overall, a very good pad for both tag shooters, for flicks like Quake Arena and or Splitgate, and Apex Legends. Gliding the G Pro Superlight across the pad, even with those glass skates from Lethal Gaming Gear and ice skates on my Orochi V2, the pad actually has quite a lot of control and never feels speedy in the sense of feeling sloppy, which is something like we see on a Zowie GTFX or something like a Cordura pad like the Endgame Gear MPC, and requires quite a level of control for those speedy type people who enjoy those speedy type pads. The pad overall feels maybe a hair overbalanced towards the line of speed, but it really depends on what skates you're using. Some skates you feel a little bit more pull than others, but on the glass skates, it almost feels as though I am gliding my mouse on air, and the combination of that tight knitting feels extremely good. Even with the Tiger Ice skates, it feels very glidey, never feels too pulley, like most control pads like the Zero and or the Eclipse. And the static balance and compared to the dynamic balance for flicks, it just feels very effortless and very good on the Focus 3. And unlike Fnatic's other offering in the Fnatic Dash, the Focus 3 again is a tightly knit cloth material, whereas the Dash is a hybrid material. The Dash is harder, the foam is not as plush as the Focus 3. And interestingly enough, with glass mouse skates from Lethal Gaming Gear on the G Pro Superlight, the speed of the two pads actually doesn't feel that off. But when you start moving towards PTFE skates, even the Tiger Ice skates, I do think that the movements feel quite a bit more effortless on the Fnatic Focus 3 compared to the Dash. So do I think that this pad is comparable to something of the likes of a Artisan Zero as far as its durability? And so far, the pad has been extremely durable for the greater than 4 weeks that I have had the pad. I can say that my favorite pairing on the pad was with the Lethal Gaming Gear glass skates. It almost felt like I was moving my mouse on air. And as far as PTFE skates, even the Tiger Ice skates, again, I don't feel much of the pad underneath my skates. So it's very smooth and a very soft experience, and I enjoy that. I don't like feeling abrasiveness on my mouse skates themselves. As far as the surface, it is very tightly knit again, so you don't really get a lot of those hairs or dust particles in the pad. You do get a few, of course, because it is a cloth pad, and you can just brush those away. No big deal. And the stitched edges are very thin. They're not raised over the pad, and I had absolutely no issue with feeling them in-game, moving my arm or wrist over my pad. I think the performance of the pad is something that strikes a very good balance with how smooth it feels. It definitely maybe feels faster than it actually is, but it is something that has a nice balance. It is something that, again, feels very smooth on those dynamic movements. It feels smooth on those static movements, and not anything where you feel any significant amount of pull, which, again, is something that I like as well. I do think, again, for $29.99, if you are looking for something in this size and you're looking for something that gives you that old school feeling cloth pad experience, something like a 3XL like we were using a few years ago when all of us were playing Fortnite, I think that the pad, again, feels great. The durability seems like it's going to be quite good. I do have a few areas that don't feel quite as soft as the day that I got the pad. That's certainly to be expected as some of those fibers loosen up. But overall, the glide and the feeling of the pad has remained the same as when I opened it out of the box over a month ago. Definitely a pad I can recommend. If that helped, guys, please leave a subscription to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.